Hi everyone, my name is Annie Agajanian and I'll be reporting on mandated reporting on the elderly. So who are mandated reporters? A mandated reporter is a person who has consistent contact with vulnerable people and are legally required to report if there is abuse or suspect of abuse of said person. So anyone in the medical field, so nurses, physicians, doctors, first responders, so police officers or firefighters, health aid caseworkers, so assisted living residents or caregivers who are at risk. So sadly, the elderly are at risk for abuse. And in the US, the elder population, or those who are of 65 years or older, is currently about 40 million, or 12.9% of the overall population. In 2010, 20% of the population were part of minority demographics, so 8.4 being African American, 6.9 being Hispanic, 3.5 being Asian or Pacific Islander, and 1% being American Indian or Native Alaskan. Types of abuse. So there are a lot of types of abuse. Uh, Physical abuse being one, and it could be a multitude of things. So it could be broken bones, bruises, swelling, welt marks, and you can usually suspect if physical abuse if the caregiver uh, doesn't let you see the elderly. So if they're not letting you as a family member, as a caseworker, to see the elderly, you can usually suspect there is something going on. Another form of abuse would be emotional abuse. So this is most often than not when the perpetrator will control the elder victim through threats or scaring the victim. Uh, Sometimes this could mean threatening to kick them out to the street, or that the perpetrator will get physical with the victim if their demands aren't being met. Sometimes Stockholm syndrome can be developed and is a way for elderly to cope with their situation. On the photo on the left, you can see that there is a caregiver, a nurse of some sort, a home caregiver, obviously getting a little bit physical with the elder woman, and she looks very distressed, very nervous. What's going to happen to her? Another form of abuse is financial abuse. So, financial abuse is the improper use of the elders' money, of their funds, belongings, or assets for the use of the caregiver or anyone else other than the elderly. So, examples of this would be fraud, stealing money, property, controlling their finances against their will. And I was actually told a story by a coworker of mine who worked for Adult Protective Services for a period in their life where they were called in by a concerned citizen. It was a concerned neighbor of a older gentleman. When they went to assess the situation, it had come to light that the children of the elder were in debt and decided to force him to sign away the deed to the home and in order to pay off their debts, and they sold the house to someone else as the elder, as their father was still living there. And so as the new people, the new tenants were trying to move in, they were also trying to force this older gentleman out. And at the same time, this older gentleman was developing dementia. So they also used that to take advantage of this man. And it was just a very bad situation. But essentially, they committed financial abuse, and this elder was put I believe in Adult Protective Services at that point, and they had to relocate him for his safety. Another form of abuse would be medication abuse. So the misuse of the elder's medications purposefully or on accident. So this could include withholding their prescriptions, over medicating the patients, refusing to refill their prescriptions, and depending on the elder's medication issues, uh, or their medical issues, this can lead to their health worsening to the point that they need to be hospitalized, or it could lead to their death. An example of this would be if an elderly happens to be diabetic. So if a diabetic doesn't get their insulin shot, uh, they can develop diabetic ketoacidosis, which, when going untreated, can actually lead to their death. So something like diabetes, which a decent amount of people will have, can lead to their death if going without their insulin or their prescriptions. So neglect can go both ways. So obviously here I've been talking about caregivers abusing their elderly patients and neglecting their patients, but neglect goes both ways. The elderly can definitely make themselves a victim. So an example of this would be the house shows sign of hoarding issues or unsanitary living conditions, untreated medical conditions. There's a lack of electricity, water, or gas in the home, a lack of food provisions, clothing, and keeping up with their hygiene. All of this obviously, it can be the elder putting themselves in that situation, and it can very well be the caregiver neglecting to pay for the water bill, electricity bill, gas bill, or not uh, buying enough food or clothing, or helping the elderly keep up with their hygiene if the elderly isn't able to be as mobile due to disabilities. And another form of neglect is a lack of social companionship. We are human. Humans need human companionship. It's in order to live happy, fulfilling lives. It does so much good for our mental health or our emotional health, and a lack of that can really put people in a depressive state. So consequences for not reporting. So for a mandated reporter, for the consequences for the victim can range from suffering physical to emotional distress. And depending on the severity of the abuse, it can leave the victim disabled as well as shortening their life and early mortality. Consequences for the reporter, if they do not report the abuse, can be 6 months in the county jail with $1,000 fine. But if the abuse leads to the death of the elder, the penalty can be 25 years to life in prison with no chance of parole and even death penalty at times. So how can we prevent elder abuse? Well, first we have the Penal Code 368 has uh, that states that the offense can be prosecuted as either a misdemeanor or felony, and the perpetrator will be punished by up to 4 years of jail time. We could have federal programs that provide funding to academic institutions to have them create mandated elder abuse and cultural diversity trainings, with the addition of violence across lifespan training for medicine and surgical subspecialties. And at the moment, there are trainings and resources for adult protective services, as well as other frontline workers to alleviate factors that amplify abusive situations and prevent elder abuse recidivism. Okay, continuing with ways to prevent, we can also report abuse when we see it, or if it is suspected, to adult protective services. We could also listen to both the elderly and caregivers, but also giving the caregivers support. So caregivers can sometimes be overworked, overloaded with the amount of maybe patience they have for a single person. With all of that, a lot of people will break under the pressure. Not saying in any way, shape, or form that is okay. It is not, especially when you are taking care of very vulnerable people. But it does lessen the chances of this type of abuse happening if we are able to support the caregivers better and give them the help that they need in order to do their job. Uh, as well as checking in with the older adults, with the elderly, those who may not have many friends or family members around to help them. So if you have a neighbor that happens to be older, please check on them, make sure they're okay. If you have a grandparent's friend who is kind of lonely at the moment, go stop by, check on them. It's just the nice thing to do, but it also puts such a smile on their face. And it's the best thing to do is always to check on the people that we care about. As well as know the signs of abuse versus signs of aging process. Sometimes the bruise that pops up on their leg isn't a bruise because they were beaten, but because maybe they tripped and bruise easier. So knowing the difference between what is being uh, what is being done to them versus what is just happening to them because of age. And these are my references. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me, and I can't wait to hear everyone's presentations. Thank you so much.